Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a phenomenon that so many of us have personally experienced, but, rarely ever quantified. We're going to explore why relationship conflicts always seem to erupt at the absolute worst possible moments. And by looking at some truly fascinating source material, we're going to uncover the hidden statistical mechanics operating right beneath the surface.
So, picture this scenario drawn directly from our sources. You've got a massive career interview tomorrow morning. The stakes are incredibly high, but instead of getting a good night's sleep, you're kept awake for 3 hours fighting over something entirely trivial, like the way you loaded the dishwasher. You end up getting maybe 4 hours of sleep, and you show up to your big moment completely depleted. Now, for years, you might just file a ruined milestone like that under bad luck. You tell yourself, well, it was just a rough night. But what if it wasn't bad luck at all? What if these perfectly timed blowups are actually operating on a deliberate schedule?
Because when you stop looking at individual arguments in isolation and start mapping them out chronologically, a really striking pattern emerges. That subjective feeling of dread, it turns into a cold, hard data set. You see, the conflicts aren't just evenly distributed across random Tuesdays. They form undeniable statistical clusters right around major events, revealing a shape that random chance simply doesn't have.
All right, let's get right into section 1, the 4 patterns of timing.
So, pattern 1. This one strikes right on the eve of your big moment. Mere hours before your event, the sabotage begins, and it targets 3 crucial currencies you absolutely need to succeed. First, your sleep and energy are drained. Second, your cognitive bandwidth is hijacked because you're mentally replaying the argument over and over. And finally, your emotional state completely tanks. You walk into your big moment marinating in self-doubt, right when you needed to be at your absolute best. And here's the kicker. The trigger for pattern 1 is almost always trivial, like that dishwasher. Actually, this is a design feature, not a bug. If the conflict was explicitly about your big interview, the sabotage would be way too obvious, right? Picking a fight over a household chore gives plausible deniability. The aftermath is honestly brilliant in a dark way. If you bomb the interview, well, it proves you can't handle stress. If you succeed, no harm done. It's a classic heads they win, tails you lose setup. Moving on to pattern 2, which targets holidays and occasions. Birthdays, Christmases, vacations, these are the most reliable fixtures on a calendar. Our sources actually point out that Christmas essentially becomes a scheduled incident for conflict. Why? Because you've invested so heavily in it with your money, your planning, and your hope. The more a moment matters to you, the more it's work as a hostage. Nobody ransoms things you don't care about, which makes these high investment days highly valuable targets. Then there's pattern 3. This one hits when you're already down. It's the conflict that arrives when you're severely ill, grieving, or just going through a really rough patch. On the surface, that seems totally counterintuitive, right? But as our source material vividly notes, this personality type literally smells lowered defenses. When you're ill or grieving, your defenses are at rock bottom, making you incredibly cheap to attack. Plus, your vulnerability makes you the legitimate center of concern, which creates a rival claim on the household's attention that, to them, just has to be undercut. And that brings us to pattern 4. Honestly, the strangest and most fascinating one of them all. This is the conflict that arrives precisely when things are going great. Think of it like a thermostat. A relationship system has a set point. If things get too warm, too comfortable, and your independence grows, that intimacy actually feels threatening to a certain personality structure. So the thermostat kicks in, using conflict as a literal circuit breaker to blow up the connection and reset the distance. If you map out your confidence over, say, a 6-month period, a really fascinating trend emerges. The attacks don't happen when you're already low from a previous fight. They reliably land at the very peak of your confidence. That good patch you thought you were in, it isn't a sign that the relationship turned a corner. It's just the upswing of a cycle whose downswing is mathematically scheduled to happen the second you let your armor down. Which leads us perfectly into section 2, the hidden engine of conflict. So, what's the common denominator across all 4 of these patterns? Whether it's your big day, a holiday, an illness, or a period of high autonomy, attention, energy, or autonomy is flowing away from the instigator. To this specific personality structure, that outward flow creates an absolutely intolerable attention deficit. The sudden conflict is just the tool designed to force the focus right back to them. The timing isn't an accident at all. The timing is literally the entire point. Let's shift gears a bit to section 3, the cultural trap for men. There is a huge contrast between what society teaches and what the data actually reveals. Society pretty much trains men to just brush off their own milestones as trivial. You're taught to soldier through the big interview, to not make a fuss about your birthday. And because of this societal script, the sabotage of these moments registers as trivial too. It makes men highly susceptible to a measurable pattern of emotional abuse that weaponizes those exact moments without ever raising any alarm bells. Since showing visible vulnerability, like being sick or grieving, is reliably punished in these dynamics, men adapt. And that adaptation is to hide their low points entirely. They grieve alone in the car. They keep health worries completely to themselves. They become, as our source describes it, sealed. And a sealed man can't ask for help from anyone, which completely finishes the job of isolating him right from the inside out.
All right, on to section 4, how to break the cycle. So how do we actually disarm this schedule? Our sources outline a really robust mechanical defense strategy consisting of 4 steps. Step 1, track the data. Step 2, control your information. Step 3, isolate yourself before events. And step 4, emotionally re-rate your holidays. Let's break these down to see how they actively dismantle the conflict schedule.
Step 1 is an absolute game changer. Keep the calendar privately. By recording just the raw data in a simple spreadsheet, date, event, incident, you're doing something incredibly powerful. You're taking that subjective, isolating dread and converting it into cold, hard data. No essays, no venting. This completely bypasses the manipulation of individual arguments. Because while your memory of a single fight about the dishwasher can easily be gaslit, a 5-year spreadsheet of data absolutely cannot. 0. That is exactly how many days a schedule can target if it doesn't know the date of your next big milestone. This is step 2. Stop pre-announcing your successes. Start sharing your big dates as late as possible, maybe even after the fact. The pattern simply can't target a date it doesn't know about. Step 3 is building a pre-event airlock. For the events that you just can't hide, physically reduce the available surface area for an attack. Go stay at a friend's place the night before the big interview. And more importantly, decide in advance that an ambush is your base case scenario. It's not a surprise anymore. Once you accept that reality, a predicted ambush loses half its force. Which brings us to the hardest step of all. If you look back at a decade of badly timed arguments, all clustered around your highs and lows with clockwork predictability, you have to ask yourself, will you let the pattern mean what it actually means? This isn't a communication flaw. No amount of loading the dishwasher correctly is going to fix it. Our sources emphasize recognizing this for what it is, a pattern of coercive control. But here is the incredible thing that happens once you finally see the data for what it is. The spell is broken. The next time the sky falls in the night before something important, you aren't going to spiral into self-doubt. A calm voice in your head will simply look at the chaos and say, right on schedule. And that single realization hands all the power right back to you. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to help you analyze your own history. Maybe you'll look at your calendar a little differently tonight. Are your ruined moments truly just a string of terrible bad luck? Or are you living as a hostage on someone else's schedule? Thank you for joining me for this explanator, and I really hope this data gives you a powerful new lens to view your own experiences.